Welcome to the International Symposium of the Asia-Pacific Alliance for Disaster Management themed Turning the Tide, 20 Years of Tsunami Readiness and Resilience. We are honored to have you join us today as we reflect on the lessons learned from the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and look toward the future. To mark the auspicious beginning of this event, I invite the following distinguished officials to join us for the traditional ceremony of lighting the oil lamp. Ms. Kauri Neki, Director, Head of Management Office and Executive Director, Civic Force, A-PAD, Japan. Ms. Anoja Senviratna, the Director of Mitigation and Research Development from the Disaster Management Center. Mr. Takafumi Kadono, Country Director of the Asian Development Bank, Mr. Yamada Tetsuya, Chief Representative of the Sri Lanka Office at the Japan International Cooperation Agency, Mr. Buanika Abesurya, Chairman of Janata Estates Development Board, Mr. Ohashi Kenji, Head of Economic and Cooperation Section and First Secretary Embassy of Japan in Sri Lanka, Mr. Makoto Hatakeyama, Vice President of Moriba Umino Koibito, Engineer Heru Presetio, former Deputy Minister, Indonesian President's Delivery Unit, Mr. Shrevan Daniel, Group Director of the Capital Maharaja Group, Mr. Firzam Hashim, Chief Operating Officer of A-PAD and Country Director of A-PAD Sri Lanka. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please rise for the national anthem.
Sri
Thank you. Please be seated. This year also marks a significant milestone for A-PAD Sri Lanka as we celebrate our 10th anniversary. We are delighted that you could join us in commemorating this occasion alongside the symposium. Let us now take a moment to reflect on the decade of impact A-PAD has had in Sri Lanka. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all put our hands together and wish happy 10th anniversary, A-PAD Sri Lanka. It is now my distinct honor to invite Mr. Firzan Hashim, the Chief Operating Officer of A-PAD International and the Country Director of A-PAD Sri Lanka, to deliver the opening remarks.
Thank you, Rochelle. Representative of the Ambassador of Japan to Sri Lanka, Mr. Ohashi Kenji, Guest of Honor and Chief Representative of Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, Sri Lanka, Mr. Yamada Tetsuya, Chairman, Janata Estate Development Board, Mr. Bhuvnaka Abesurya, Excellencies, distinguished guests, media representatives, those connected virtually, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning to all of you. It is indeed a privilege and pleasure to welcome you. This year, we take pride in hosting the annual A-PAD International Symposium, as it also signifies 10 years of A-PAD presence in Sri Lanka. A milestone that we are honored to share with you, that is our partners, without whom we could not have served with excellence. Considering the reasons for our success, I believe A-PAD has been able to earn the trust of its partners. 10 years ago, A-PAD Sri Lanka was established with the guidance of the Management Office in Japan with the intent of linking private sector with the government, humanitarian, and development sectors. A strategic link to enhance disaster preparedness, prioritize mitigation, and effectively coordinate humanitarian emergencies and recovery. Given Sri Lanka's acute susceptibility to climate change and related extreme weather events, we together strove to play a complementary role to the government in saving lives, livelihoods, and businesses. In this context, we thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan, the ODA, Overseas Development Assistance Program, the Embassy of Japan in Sri Lanka, the Ministry of Defense, Sri Lanka, the Disaster Management Center in particular, the DG, his staff, and the former DG is also here, the tri-services, and the other state agencies for the open door policy extended to A-PAD. From influencing boardrooms of private sector companies to institutionalize disaster risk reduction, supporting government in local and national disaster management advocacy, emphasizing disaster risk strategies to support business sustainability, nurturing a risk reduction partnership with media, and professionalizing civil military search and rescue teams, we together have strengthened the community and business resilience. A-PAD platform serves in crucial times. COVID-19 pandemic was a critical juncture in which government, societies, and economies struggled to cope. A-PAD Sri Lanka was able to respond to government needs and mobilize private sector resources swiftly and efficiently during this period. We jointly supported micro, small, and medium enterprises to continue operations and prepared businesses with COVID-19 exit strategies. Fully aware of their 52% contribution to the national GDP, a significant factor driving the growth of Sri Lanka's economy. In all these efforts, the private sector has remained our steadfast strength and motivation. I would like to take this opportunity to commend their magnanimity and their commitment to saving lives and businesses. Noteworthy is to mention those behind a decade of this successful journey. Strategy is important, but execution is everything. A big thank you to my A-PAD colleagues, both past and present, who are here with us today, for your commitment, dedication, innovation, and creativity. It certainly has had a significant impact. Shifting our focus to the matter at hand, turning the tide, 20 years of tsunami readiness and resilience. You may wonder the reasoning behind the choice of this topic. Why tsunami? 2 decades ago, the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami devastated South and South Asia, claiming over 227,000 lives, with 35,000 deaths being recorded in Sri Lanka alone. While we recognize Sri Lanka's commendable progress from the enactment of the Disaster Management Act in 2005 and the subsequent prioritization of disaster risk reduction, assessing the country's disaster readiness at intervals still remain imperative, considering the frequency of extreme events and the polycrisis that now shape the global landscape. Marking the lapse of 20 years since the tragic incident in 2004, the intention of this symposium is to foster a dialogue on disaster preparedness with special focus on tsunami readiness. Our aim is to understand where Sri Lanka stands in the event a disaster in the scale of 2004 tsunami recurring. how best we utilize this opportunity to enhance public-private partnerships in building resilience, whilst learning from the past experience in reinforcing the way forward. Being a member of the UNICEF Business Council in Sri Lanka, I cannot reiterate more the sufferings of children in crisis, whether in conflict settings or disasters due to natural hazards. A third of the tsunami victims in Sri Lanka were children. Ladies and gentlemen, Sri Lanka is re-emerging from an unprecedented macroeconomic crisis at present. While the recovery has been better than expected due to hard-won policy measures, a single shock can completely change the course of direction. The devastation caused by the 2004 tsunami, with the loss of assets amounting to over $1 billion US, thus implies the possibility of an ever-persistent threat that can cripple a country's economy in a matter of seconds. Given the fragile economic situation that Sri Lanka is currently facing, the resilience of our 1,600-kilometer coastal belt is critical, as it presents a vital lifeline for our economy, with 70% of tourist hotels and 61% of industrial units operating in the coastal zone. On this 10th anniversary of A-PAD's presence in Sri Lanka, we look forward to drawing your attention to a relevant topic that can inspire wider discussion on disaster risk management and emphasize how proactive preparedness measures can not only save lives and businesses, but also protect a recovering national economy. We hope to stimulate dialogue on the role of multi-sector holder involvement, the use of technology to advance both prevention and recovery efforts, the need for national organizational level mitigation plans to reduce losses, support business continuity, and spur growth. Global partnerships, including that of Connecting Business Initiatives, otherwise called CBI, which A-PAD Sri Lanka is a member, are avenues to share knowledge, discuss latest developments and trends in reducing risks. CBI supports both crisis response and development efforts by integrating and engaging the private sector world over. For delegates who have traveled from Japan, Indonesia, the United States, Geneva, and Singapore, among whom are representing CBI, Airlink, and my colleagues from A-PAD International, our utmost gratitude to you. I would like to end by thanking you all for being present here today and for the wonderful partnerships we have cultivated over the years. It has been a pleasure and an honor to serve alongside you, and we look forward to many more robust collaboration in Sri Lanka's risk reduction landscape. The future belongs to all of us, the children and the youth in particular. Let us then come together to make it safe, resilient, and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hashim. A-PAD has had the incredible honor of working with His Excellency Mr. Mizukoshi Hidaiki, the Ambassador of Japan to Sri Lanka. His efforts have significantly strengthened the collaboration between our two nations. Representing him today, we warmly welcome Mr. Ohashi Kenji, Head of Economic and Cooperation Section and First Secretary of the Embassy of Japan in Sri Lanka, to deliver his address.
Mr. Filsan Hashim, a Country Director, A-PAD Sri Lanka, Mr. Yamada Tetsuya, Chief Representative of Sri Lanka JICA Office, and the representative of Disaster Management Center, private company, NPO, NGOs. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, Ayubowan, and Wanakam. I'm afraid Ambassador Mizukoshi is unable to attend today, and he deeply regrets not being able to join you. Therefore, I would like to convey his message on his behalf. I'm deeply honored to be invited to this symposium organized by A-PAD. I would like to express my sincere admiration for A-PAD's initiative for organizing a seminar on this important topic of disaster preparedness and resilience. In recent years, the impact of climate change has led to an alarming increase in the frequency and intensity of natural disasters worldwide. These disasters are not only occurring more often, but also are growing in scale and severity, affecting a broader range of regions and communities. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake, with a magnitude of exceeding 9, unleashed devastating tsunamis that wreaked havoc across several countries, claiming approximately 230,000 lives. In Sri Lanka alone, the death toll reached about 30,000. The destruction was unprecedented, with widespread damage to homes and infrastructures, and the loss of countries' livelihoods. Similarly, in March 2011, Japan faced the Great East Japan earthquake and subsequent tsunami, which resulted in the loss of countries' lives and inflicted significant socioeconomic damage. Earlier this year, in Japan, a major earthquake struck the Noto Peninsula in Japan, causing considerable damage, particularly to residential areas and critical infrastructure. In response, A-PAD swiftly dispatched its emergency rescue teams and provided much-needed relief. I would like to take this opportunity to express our deepest appreciation to A-PADs and all other entities that extended their assistance to us. Ladies and gentlemen, we must not allow the lessons learned from these large-scale disasters and the tragic loss of lives to fade away from our collective memory. As we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the tragic Sumatra earthquake, we are reminded of the critical importance of disaster risk management and the urgent need to address the changes posed by climate change. It is imperative that we renew our focus on disaster prevention and mitigation measures. In this respect, the theme of this symposium is both timely and essential, as it highlights the necessity for renewed commitment and collective action in these areas. Ladies and gentlemen, no one can predict when a natural disaster will occur. In Japan, we have a proverb, 天災は忘れた頃にやってくる, which means natural disasters strike when we least expect them. When calamities such as tsunamis strike, the immediacy of the response is pivotal, determining not only the survival of those affected, but also the speed at which we can begin to rebuild their lives. A-PAD has consistently demonstrated an unparalleled ability to mobilize resources, coordinate efforts, and deliver and where it is needed most, often under the most challenging conditions. A-PAD's role is not merely operational, it is foundational to the resilience of our communities. By fostering partnership across sectors and borders, A-PAD ensures our response to disaster is not just reactive, but also proactive. This collaborative spirit, transcending national boundaries, is at the core of A-PAD's mission and is crucial to the successful mitigation of disaster impacts. A-PAD's contributions are not limited to time of crisis. Through its unwavering commitment and to preparedness and education, A-PAD empowers communities with the knowledge and tools they need to withstand future disasters. This foresight and dedication set A-PAD apart as a leader in disaster management in the Asia-Pacific region. In this context, another Japanese proverb comes to mind, 備えあれば憂いなし, better safe than sorry. A-PAD's initiatives embody this wisdom. On behalf of all those whose lives have been touched and saved by A-PAD's work, I extend our deepest thanks. Your unwavering dedication and altruistic service have made a profound difference in countless lives. We are immensely grateful for the sacrifices you make and the risks you take to ensure the safety and well-being of others. Japan remains steadfast to the commitment to A-PADs. Ladies and gentlemen, Japan has been active in helping Sri Lanka to be better prepared for natural disasters and respond better to the damage caused by disasters. Japan has not only provided emergency assistance at the time of tsunami, but also supported the improvement of living conditions and the reconstruction of local economies in tsunami-affected areas. through tsunami recovery projects since 2004. Japan has also helped to enhance Sri Lanka's disaster preparedness capabilities through conducting training and education programs using Japan's disaster prevention technology and know-how. Furthermore, Japan is currently assisting the establishment of a meteorological Doppler radar system that is designed to enhance preparedness for natural disasters in Sri Lanka. We hope these endeavors will help to protect Sri Lankan people's lives in the future and make the country more resilient to natural disasters. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to reiterate, we must not let the lessons learned from tragic disasters and the loss of so many precious lives fade away. In this regard, I would like to highlight a significant concept adopted at the third United Nations World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction held in Sendai, Japan in 2015. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction emphasizes the principle of build back better. Every time we face disasters, no matter how tragic and challenging, we must be better prepared, and we must rise again, stronger and wiser. With our accumulated experience and wisdom, we can transform challenges into opportunities for further development. Or rather, we have to do so, not to waste the painful lessons at the cost of the precious lives of so many people. May we continue to support and strengthen the efforts of A-PAD and other relevant stakeholders, knowing that together we can build a safer, more resilient future for all. I sincerely hope this event will contribute to addressing our global challenges by further enhancing multilateral cooperation, bringing greater resilience and prosperity to the world than ever before. Thank you very much.
ශ්‍රී ලංකාව ආවට මුහුද ගොඩ ගැලීම නිසා බෙරළ ආශ්‍රිත ප්‍රදේශ රැසක් ජලයෙන් යටපෙමින් පවතිනවා.
In the blink of an eye, the world was changed forever. No one could have predicted the horror that would unfold. In mere moments, paradise became a nightmare. Homes were swept away. Families ripped apart, lives consumed by the relentless surge. 230,000 lives lost, millions displaced. An entire world changed. The tsunami left behind more than just destruction. It left scars that will never fully heal. A reminder of how unprepared we were and the price we paid. We lost so much, and with it, the guilt of not being ready, not doing enough. But from the ashes of tragedy, we must rise stronger, wiser, and more prepared. We owe it to those we lost to be ready for whatever comes next. Together, we move ahead, determined and prepared, ready for challenges the future holds. A-PAD International Symposium 2024. Turning the Tide, 20 years of tsunami readiness and resilience.
As we commemorate the tragedy of 2004, which profoundly affected Sri Lanka, we remain resolute in ensuring that the lives lost were not in vain. We honor their memory by building resilient communities and securing the future of Sri Lanka and its generations to come. We now have the privilege of welcoming Mr. Yamada Tetsuya, Chair Representative of the Sri Lanka Office of the Japan International Cooperation Agency, to deliver the keynote address.
Mr. Filzan Hashim, CEO of A-PAD and Country Director of A-PAD Sri Lanka, and Mr. Ohashi Kenji, First Secretary of Embassy of Japan in Sri Lanka, Excellencies, colleagues, and friends from development partners, officials from ministries and agencies of government of Sri Lanka, private sector partners, distinguished guests. Very good morning. Ayubowan, wanakam, assalamu alaikum, ohayo gozaimasu. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to be able to attend this very important 20th anniversary event conducted by A-PAD. And I would like to congratulate A-PAD Sri Lanka on 10th anniversary of establishment of A-PAD Sri Lanka. In my remarks, looking back at the 20th years in the past, I wanted to highlight two things. First, the importance of international cooperation. Second, mobilizing financing. With regard to the first one, international cooperation, looking back into 20 years in the past, I think all of us have been so successful in bringing this agenda of disaster risk reduction and management up to the central agenda at the international arena. For example, Hyogo Action Plan, which is the key instrument for implementing disaster risk reduction, was adopted by the member states of the United Nations in 2004. And that was followed by Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which was adopted in 2015 following the Great Eastern Japan earthquake and tsunami in 2011. And also, SDGs, as you all know, was adopted in year 2015. I think SDGs is, quite well known to all the members sitting here, but unfortunately, I don't think disaster risks component and elements are embedded in SDGs. So I just wanted to share with you some of those targets embedded in the SDGs. So number one, as you all know, number one goal is no poverty, no poverty. And among all these targets and no poverty goal, there is one sentence that goes like this: by 2030, build the resilience of the poor and vulnerable, and reduce exposure and vulnerability to climate-related extreme events and other economic, social, and environmental shocks and disasters. And also, goal number 11. Goal number 11 is sustainable cities and communities. There, also, two targets related to disasters. So let me also cite these two targets. Target 11.5 says, by 2030, significantly reduce the number of deaths and the number of people affected, and substantially decrease the direct economic losses relative to global gross domestic product caused by disasters. Also, there's a target numbered 11.b that says, by 2020, which is overdue already, by 2020, develop and implement holistic disaster risk management in line with the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030. So those targets are embedded in SDGs. So that means also we were very successful in bringing this very important agenda of disaster risk reduction and management into the top-level international agenda. And also, with regard to the Japanese government policy, Prime Minister Kishida last year announced a new plan for free and open Indo-Pacific. And there is a new focus for cooperation for free and open Indo-Pacific. To expand cooperation with increased focus on global commons, which also means climate, environment, and global health, and cyberspace, and disaster. And thus, enhance the resilience and sustainability of societies. So in line with all these policies and international directions, we have been working on concrete measures to increase and enhance our resilience against disasters, including tsunami. JICA has been also quite intensively working with many countries in the world in line with these international guiding principles, agenda, and initiatives. JICA places importance on both structural measures and non-structural measures against tsunami. We work together at the level of local community, and also we work at the level of national and international level. And we also place great importance on partnership with various stakeholders. For example, in Sri Lanka, we have been working together with Disaster Management Center, National Building Research Organization, NBRO, Department of Meteorology, Sri Lanka Land Development Cooperation, Irrigation Department, academia, and private sector, civil society organization, etc. Not only Sri Lanka, of course, we have been working together with other nations, member countries of A-PAD and non-member countries. Currently, we are working very intensely with Indonesian government on capacity development project on operation of earthquake and tsunami analysis and warning system. And also, we are working together with Pacific Island nations such as Vanuatu, and also working together with the countries in the other part of the other end of the Pacific Ocean, like Ecuador, El Salvador, Peru, Chile, and other countries. Secondly, I would like to talk about mobilizing financing, which is also quite important to set this international agenda into motion. And especially in this difficult time when many countries are having debt sustainability issue, mobilizing financing is a very important component of disaster risk management, not to mention. And Sendai framework underscores the importance of pre-investment. So investment needs a lot of money, but in difficult times of debt sustainability issue, DRR, DRM tends to get left behind of the agenda. So government spend less money. There is a tendency that the government spends less money on DRR and DRM, unfortunately. But every $1 invested in DRR can save up to $15 in post-disaster recovery spending. So pre-investment really pays off. So the difficulty is how to mobilize financing. International community needs to step up its effort to invest more in DRR. And also, new way of financing, such as social bond, blended financing, PPP, ESG investment, green financing, those innovative approach should be taken. On the part of JICA, let me also share with you some of those examples of our efforts to mobilize more financing into DRR. First example is social bonds and sustainability bonds that we issue in the area of DRR. Since 2016, JICA has been issuing a lot of social bonds. We have many financing sources. We get money from the government of Japan, from general budget. We raise funds in the market. We get repayments from our clients. So those are the main source of financing. But since 2016, we started issuing bonds in the market by issuing social bonds. And since then, we have been able to raise funds in the amount of over 2 billion US dollars in the market. And since then, all the bonds that we issued in the market has been social bond. And for the first time in the history of JICA, last year, we were able to raise fund through disaster risk reduction bond. We were able to issue the bond, disaster risk reduction bond, in the amount of, I think it's 300 billion Japanese yen, which is more or less equal to 2 billion US dollars. Oh, I'm sorry. The DRR bond that we issued last year was in the size of Japanese yen 32 billion. 32 billion, I'm sorry. That's more or less equal to 220 million US dollars. And second example is enhancing preparedness through financing. Also last year, in August, we were able to sign the loan agreement with Philippines government for post-disaster standby loan in the amount of 30 billion Japanese yen, which is more or less equal to 210 million US dollars. So those are some of those examples that we have to mobilize financing, more financing into DRR and DRM in an innovative way. In concluding my remarks, I would like to say that the 20th commemoration of the tsunami is not only a time of remembrance, but also an opportunity to reaffirm our dedication to building a safer, more resilient world. So let us honor the memory of those we lost by continuing working together, sharing knowledge, and implementing the principles of the Sendai framework with unwavering efforts. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Yamada. We now transition to one of the most anticipated segments of the event, and that is the panel discussion. We are excited and honored to set the stage for this session. I now invite our panel chair, Ms. Sonali Vanigabaduge, Company Secretary of the Capital Maharaja Group. As this segment promises to be insightful, allow me to introduce and invite our distinguished panelists. Mr. Makoto Hatakeyama, Vice President of Moreva Umino Kobioto in Japan. Engineer Herul Pretseyo, former Deputy Minister of the Indonesian President's Delivery Unit in Indonesia. Mr. Sakurazawa Takafumi, representative of Sri Lanka Office of the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Mr. Denver De Silva, Global Head of Sustainability and Facilities, Virtusa Corporation, and the Joint Country Head of Virtusa Sri Lanka. Ms. Sukita Arangallage, Head of Sustainability of Cargill Ceylon PLC. Mr. Chaturaliana Rachi, Director of Preparedness, Disaster Management Center.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the A-PAD International Symposium 2024, held under the theme Turning the Tide, 20 Years of Tsunami Readiness and Resilience. We have a fabulous panel today. You already have the speaker profiles, so without further ado, let me just set the stage before commencing and embarking on this panel discussion. The tsunami that struck South and Southeast Asia, including the Sri Lankan shores 20 years ago, is considered to be one of the most devastating natural disasters in global history. It claimed close to 35,000 lives in Sri Lanka alone, leaving about 1 million people displaced. At the time, Sri Lanka was not prepared to respond to a disaster of such scale, owing to a lack of awareness, a lack of early warning systems, and an institutionalized disaster management framework. Since then, we have seen changes. The Disaster Management Center was set up. There have been resilience efforts across the island. I'm pleased to pose my first question to Mr. Sakurazawa Takafumi, representative of the Sri Lanka office, Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA. JICA plays a pivotal role in enhancing global resilience in disaster preparedness. Speak to us about the importance of collaboration, international collaboration in tsunami preparedness efforts across countries where JICA is involved. And I'd also like your perspectives, Mr. Takafumi, on how Sri Lanka can benefit from regional partnerships and knowledge sharing sessions.
I think major role of international cooperation is not only to secure the mobilize the financing, but also to ensure that every country can reflect the lesson learned from other countries to the tsunami preparedness. So JICA supported not only Sri Lanka, but also Indonesia to rebuild the affected areas by the tsunami in 2004. In Indonesia, the casualties stand at 160,000, and also the houses destroyed partially and completely reached around 280,000. So JICA's assistance focused on Aceh, located in the northern part of Sumatra Island. The coastal area were severely damaged by the tsunami, and also following the tsunami, multilateral and bilateral donors, international and domestic NGOs started to aid very quickly. The total budget of reconstruction from tsunami reached around 6.1 billion US dollars. Out of such a budget, NGOs contributed 1.6 billion US dollars, as well as the donors contributed around 2.1 US dollars. This budget was mainly utilized to rebuild damaged houses. However, due to poor coordination between the government, donors, NGOs, and the citizens, resettlement became difficult, and most of the houses were rebuilt in their original locations. So in the event of the future tsunami, those houses could be affected again. So to avoid such a situation, so Sri Lanka could learn from other countries, not only in building early warning systems and conducting evacuation drills, but also in preparation for tsunami, such as considering land use for houses to reduce the tsunami risks, and also establishing the mechanism of stakeholder coordination in advance for Build Back Better. Yes.
Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives and for your opening remarks. I'd like to move on to Ms. Sukita Arangalake, Head of Sustainability, Cargill's PLC. In the context of emergencies, what are some of the challenges that Cargill's has faced? How have you navigated these challenges to ensure the continuity of supply chains?
Thank you, Sonali, for the question. Before I begin, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to Hush and the A-PAD team of Sri Lanka for inviting Cargill's to join this session. And also, I'm grateful in more ways than one, because if not for divine intervention on that day, I would actually probably not be here, because I was planning to travel back from Hikkadua on the day of the tsunami, but came back the previous night. And we were planning to open the Hambantota Cargill's Food City outlet on the day of the tsunami, and the Dikwella outlet was open the previous day. We lost one of our colleagues from the Dikwella branch to the tsunami, so I would like to honor his memory as well. So in terms of sustainability of supply chain, Cargill celebrates 180 years this year, and we are predominantly in the food industry, and we've got food retail spread over 500 plus outlets across the country. We've got FMCG operations based in 10 locations. As you can see from the map here, the extent of the reach that Cargill's has across the country. So basically, being in the food industry, being prepared and resilient to face emergencies is very, very important. And what we have learned from the emergency situations that we have faced, not only from the tsunami, but also recently, in the recent past, COVID and Easter attacks, and not forgetting the economic crisis, has taught us various lessons. And in terms of the challenges, basically in any emergency situation, our retail operations are hit the hardest because footfall to the outlets are reduced, and that has a major impact, a direct impact on revenue. And then, of course, you have panic buying, and you can't blame the consumer for engaging in panic buying. That leads to a shortage of essential items. And FMCG operations are disrupted because raw material, logistics, supplies themselves are affected by any emergency. And then we have the restaurant sector being affected because we are the franchise holders for KFC. The restaurants also see a reduction in footfall. And then, very importantly, staff, our own team. So they are affected by perhaps not being able to come to work or even health and safety concerns. So all of those pose a challenge, and that they have certainly posed challenges to us in the emergency situations that we have faced. But we have learned, we have put in place systems to overcome and be resilient going forward. In terms of retail operations, finding new ways of reaching the consumer were important. So during COVID, we introduced a system, a mechanism called Cargill's to Home. That was a few trucks that went around selling essential items to people who were not able to come to the outlets. And then the online platform, we were not ready with the online platform when COVID struck. And as in a case of any emergency, there are things that we have to quickly put in place. So the online platform came in place very soon thereafter. And then we also have our managers of the various outlets having their WhatsApp groups and, being able to deliver door to door. Due to our collection process and being connected to the farming network directly, we were not affected to that extent because we have our own logistics operation, 24-hour cold chain, no middlemen, so that was easy for us. And then staff, I'm actually humbled to say that we were one of the few companies where there were no pay cuts, there were no redundancies. And the confidence and the sense of security that the staff experienced really helped us in, picking ourselves up fast and moving forward. So.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. My next question is to Engineer Heru Prasetyo, former Deputy Minister of Indonesia's President's Delivery Unit, Indonesia. For us here in Sri Lanka, learning from international best practices is of such pivotal importance, Mr. Prasetyo. A number of local and international actors are involved in disaster response and reconstruction efforts in Indonesia. What are some of the core strategies that Indonesia has adopted in relation to communication systems, distribution networks, coordinating with government?
Thank you very much for the questions. But let me give you some relevant facts before. When the tsunami strikes Aceh, 2004, the president was just been elected in September. So the government is actually still forming its mind. It was a big surprise that we got that. And because of that, when it comes to the reconstruction side, which is later on, like 6 months, before that we learn, because when you're trying to do lessons that we learn, we need to understand the context. So we went to Japan. So we learned how the Hanshin Awaji earthquake was actually dealt with by the government of Japan. And then we also went to, later on, we went to the Philippines after the facts to see how they are responding to the Typhoon Haiyan. As a reference, the Hanshin Awaji earthquake has a damage and loss assessment valued at about 100 billion. It's a very well-developed urban industrial area. In the case of Aceh, it was a very bad, very poor rural economy with conflict of 37 years. The social fabric is nowhere to see. All right, everybody is trusting nobody. It's 800 kilometers underdeveloped coastline, second poorest in the country. And the dollar was 7 billion US dollars compared to 100 billion in the Kobe case. Now, with that kind of conditions, we learn and we learn and we learn. And so we developed some framework to be able to deal with that. The amount of the disaster is beyond the government's capacity to do, and we don't have the bond possibilities like what Japan has now. So the framework number one that we are doing is the Declaration for International Openness. Aceh, that was conflicted for the last 30 years, 37 years, needs to be in peace. And in the past, it was a no-no area for foreigners to come because of the conflict itself. So we open it up. We open it up, we make agreement with multilateral, multi-stakeholder parties. We have the practicality applied logistic hubs, because all the logistic hubs that we have was destroyed. We do the infusion. We use the UN ECLAC DALA process, led by World Bank. agree on financial support process on and off budget. Some of the funding are out of our own budget, and we stop our business as usual government practices. This is very important to me because the government processes is very slow, so you will not be able to recover on time. So the government create a law for the agency in Aceh to be able to respond very quickly to the problem and talk to the multilateral organization and countries that we don't have to go through the lengthy process of government of Indonesia on the reconstruction, so they can go directly and fastly. But we, as the agency that was leading that, is in control to make sure that everybody is signing the Pact of Integrity. So the corruption is something that we are very much handling that in the very core. I went around the world to connect with countries. I went to Japan, I went to New Zealand, I went to everywhere to report and tell everybody this is how the reconstruction has done. And the result of that is that out of the pledge of $5.2 billion US, in 5 years, we were able to realize 104% of that pledge into the construction, into the projects, into the systems. 3,000 kilometers of road was built. Almost half of it was done by JICA. Thank you very much. So, and 145,000 houses was built during that 4 years and continues. The latest report that I heard in the journal of 2021 is that the economy of Aceh has recovered, because one thing that is very important for those recovery and reconstruction process is don't be too obsessed with efficiency in the cost of the economy of the people. For instance, if you get all the materials, logistics controlled by the process, by the government, then it may actually deny the local economy for growing and for surviving, because they need to have the supply chains working through them and all those things. If the agency is taking it over after the disaster, the locations will not be able to bounce back. On the question, on the statement about the houses nearby the shores, we have initially pushed them up to the mountain, and they said, if you do that, you kill ourselves. After the 160,000 people die, another 100,000 will starve because we cannot get to the sea to do our fishermen's work. So we did build the houses near the shores, continuous, and knowing that the risk of getting another problem when tsunami strike still there, but we do that open-eyed in the sense that if the tsunami hits in another 100 years, we will not deny these people their livelihood in 100 years. So basically what we are trying to say is that saving more life and saving livelihood in a better way. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Prasetyo. My next question is to Mr. Makoto Hatakeyama, who's the Vice Chairman of Moriwa Umino Koibito, which is a non-profit in Japan. I believe we will also get translation support from Ms. Ayako Tanaka. When we speak about Japan, natural disasters are quite frequent, from earthquakes to typhoons. However, in Japan, it doesn't, the natural hazard doesn't turn into a disaster, because as a community, there is so much of preparedness in Japan. So my question to you is, Mr. Makoto, considering Japan's advanced early warning systems and robust disaster management infrastructure, what specific challenges were identified during the 2011 disaster, and what measures have been implemented since then to address these challenges? And the question why I ask you this is because Sri Lanka is in the process of learning lessons from its regional counterparts.
I am
Hatakeyama from Miyagi Prefecture, Japan.
まず、東日本大震災の際に多くの方々からご支援いただいたことをまず感謝申し上げます。
First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for the support and assistance from all over the world for the great Eastern Japan earthquake and tsunami in year 2011.
さて、完璧な防災対策は存在しないということを前提としてお話しいたします。また防災インフラの整備につきましては、日本の場合は被災した自治体ごとに対応策が違うということも強調しておきます。
Now, I would like to speak on the assumption or premise that there are no perfect disaster prevention measures. I would also like to emphasize that with regard to the development of disaster prevention infrastructure, in the case of Japan, different municipalities or local authorities in the affected areas have taken different measures.
311の大津波は想定をはるかに超える極めて大規模なものでしたので、まず電力が失われて早期警報システムというのはほぼ機能せず、情報の混乱が現場では起きておりました。でまた防潮堤などの強固な防災インフラは津波で一瞬で破壊され機能を失いました。スライドの1枚を見せながらお願いします。
Now, the tsunami of the 11th March 2011 was an extremely large scale, far exceeding expectations. So, as a result, electricity supply was lost. So, early warning systems did not function, and there was information confusion. In addition, solid disaster prevention infrastructure, such as seawalls, were destroyed by the tsunami in seconds and lost their function, as in this slide.
スライドの写真はですね、破壊された防災インフラの防潮堤になります。で、その後の対策としましては、独立した電源を確保して、遠隔操作で全てを対応するように仕組みが切り替わりました。また防災インフラとしては311のような巨大な津波には対応しないということを前提としまして、新たに防潮堤、河川護岸などを建設しています。
So after this disaster, the opening and closing operational system of the sluice gate was switched from manual to remote operation. And also, on the assumption that there is no perfect countermeasure for such a huge scale tsunami, that we constructed not the huge scale, but assuming the rather medium and smaller scale tsunami, we constructed sea embankments and sea walls.
先ほど隣の方がお話ししましたけれども、私も漁民でして、被災した住宅を高台に移転するかどうかという対策には、私は乗りました。で漁民も含めて基本的には津波が起きた低地には住宅は建てられないという法律ができます。 そのため人々はある程度標高が高い高台に移転することになりまして、安全は担保されたことにはなりますが、一方でやはり漁業という仕事は海でするものですので、いちいち高台から海にまで移動しなければいけないという手間は実際に発生しています。
So that I also belong to the fishery the village community. So that I also faced an issue of whether to relocate to the higher ground or not. So there was a law established to prohibit people from living in the coastal area closer to the coast after the disaster. But also there's livelihood issues, so it is really a challenge how to realize the livelihood and the safety of the people.
対策として非常に有効であることについては、有事の際に円滑にその支援活動ができる素地を築くために民間の支援組織と事前に連携しておくこと、そして J-PAD のような広域的な連携組織で情報の共有をしていくということは、防災減災対策として極めて有効であると付け加えておきます。
Also would like to add that it is extremely effective as a disaster prevention and mitigation measure to cooperate with private and civil supporting organizations in advance. It means in ordinary times to ensure that support activities are carried out smoothly in the event of an emergency, and that wide regional cooperation organizations such as J-PAD sharing information on disaster prevention measures and other information also very effective.
Thank you very much, both to Mr. Makoto and Ms. Ayako. Mr. Chathura Lianarachi, I come to you next. The Disaster Management Center is the key stakeholder in Sri Lanka when it comes to disaster risk reduction and disaster preparedness. You work as Director Preparedness. Given the significant advancement in disaster management systems over the past 20 years, how prepared is Sri Lanka to tackle a tsunami that could strike at any time? And could you highlight the current mechanisms that are in place?
Thank you. First of all, let me congratulate A-PAD Sri Lanka of celebrating their 10th anniversary, at the same time organizing this particular event commemorating 20th years of Great Indian Ocean Tsunami itself. Come back to the question itself, starting from this Indian Ocean Tsunami, a parliamentary select committee appointed by the government of Sri Lanka, and this particular committee submit the proposal of and at the same time establish this particular DM Act number 13 of 2005 and the Disaster Management Center. There onwards, we have worked up to now with covering all phases of disaster management cycle in line with global framework. That time we had this HFA, Hugo Framework for Actions, and other international framework, and also the national policies. In line with that, we have a 10-year roadmap, Safer Sri Lanka, that particular action plan itself. Then for the risk for tsunami, of course, we are having a great risk from Andaman, Sumatra segment of the Sunda Arc. It's about 8.9 out of 10 in the risk index, which is published by the GFDRR 2019. At the same time, OSHA 2017 Global Risk Index is comparing all other hazards, tsunami having the greater risk. So what are the, say suppose, possible tsunami-generated sources, of course, researchers at the same time, this particular region have identified, of course, we have experienced this from earthquakes, then volcanoes, submarine landslide. Recently, we have experienced it in Indonesia, Lombok incident. Then storm surges like Philippines, we experience it. Then the meteor impact, of course, that might happen in future, and the landslide or ice sampling. So those are the possible, tsunami-generated sources. As Has mentioned earlier, of course, we are an island nation having 1,340 kilometers coastal belt, which covering 14 coastal districts, 78 divisional secretariat divisions, and 1,508 GNDs, over 1.2 million coastal population living there. The researchers at the same time, Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation Systems identified there are 4 possible impact scenarios for Sri Lanka, starting from Akran of Myanmar, then North Andaman, that is Sumatra, that is the kind of closest scenario that can impact within 90 minutes, 1.5 hours, the tidal wave or the tsunami wave reach our coastline. Then the South Sumatra, it is something, we are having 2.5 hours. Then finally the Makran Trench, adjacent to southwestern coast of Pakistan in the Gulf of Oman. So those are the 4 possible scenarios. And as I mentioned, as per the Act number 13 of 2005, Disaster Management Center is responsible to develop the National Disaster Management Plan, which covers the overall disaster management framework in the country. At the same time, Emergency Operation Plan, where we have all the stakeholder agencies, roles and responsibilities before, during and after. Then we had the hazard profile. We developed the hazard profile in 2012 and also risk index in 2019. So those things we have done to understand the risk of tsunami. Then, of course, we built the regional partnerships with IORA, Indian Ocean Ring Association, BIMSTEC, and also SARC. At the same time, Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System, where this particular system initially activated just after 2011, because initially we had this Pacific PTWS called Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. They produce with JAXA, Japan, send us those warning of tsunami. Then 2011 onwards, this particular IOWTMS fully activated and operationalized. There we have 3 service providers, namely India having the INCOIS, then Indonesia having the BMKG, and the Australia having Bureau of Meteorology. So they are basically sending us these tsunami information bulletins to Sri Lanka. For Sri Lanka Disaster Management Center, DGDMC is the tsunami national contact, and Department of Meteorology is the National Tsunami Warning Center. They got those messages and they analyze and develop 4 bulletins. Namely, first is earthquake bulletin, then alert. Third one is warning and evacuation. Fourth one is stand down or no threat. Those are the bulletins that they issue. Then we have developed standard operation procedure, upstream, DMC the interface, then the downstream. And we conduct a lot of tsunami preparedness activities, response activities, and also we develop all 14 coastal district tsunami operational plans. And child-centered DRR, of course, we done a lot of exercises with coastal schools itself, and also these industries which comes to us to get the guidance of conducting those exercises. Even the hotel industry also working with us through TDA. So hospital preparedness, of course, we are having. For the question that you asked about nighttime, of course, yeah, we have a 24/7 emergency operation center and 117 call center. and also Triforces and police communication, and also liaison officers there. So the system is there. At the same time, our former DG here, he had initiated this SOS tsunami call alert. So that is with the TRC and mobile service providers sending immediately the voice and the message of alerting the vulnerable population and the respondents. Of course, that is there, and also IGN, Intergovernmental Network System, and media. Up to midnight, of course, media also working. So those kind of communication to send those messages to the last person, last mile, it's available. Also, we have conducted a lot of exercises with a lot of parties. Even we are part of this Indian Ocean Tsunami exercise, IOWAVE, biannual exercises. But of course, we didn't conduct any nighttime drill that we have to do. But of course, we need to have a lot of planning, resources, approvals, at the same time public awareness to prevent any unwanted panic. So that is a kind of a thing that we have to consider, because recently we have conducted one exercise in Mathura, Mahamaya College, and that particular message went to President Office and even for the regional countries also. Our DG that time blamed from the President regarding that what is happening there, because the WhatsApp or the media sent that message and viraled it. So that's we have to have a major concern on it. Thank you.
Sure. Just a quick follow-up question. How do you ensure that these processes are done in such a way that no one gets left behind, that these processes are inclusive, and they also take into consideration those with disability, for example?
Yes. In fact, as I mentioned, in the Tsunami Operational Plan, Coastal Operational Plan, we have considered all those stuff. Even in our National Disaster Management Plan, this inclusiveness, or rather the marginalized groups, those things were included. There are 153 strategic activities under 4 priority actions in line with the Sendai framework. So those are things included, because we have identified the women, children, and the disabled as the most vulnerable group for this particular tsunami risk itself.
Sure, thank you very much. I move on now to Mr. Denver De Silva, Global Head of Sustainability and Facilities, Virtusa Corp, Joint Country Head, Virtusa Sri Lanka. Mr. De Silva, it's so important to empower the private sector to ensure that they don't become a victim during disasters, and that they take on a proactive role as one of the key stakeholders in a country. Speak to us about how technology has evolved and the usage of technology in enabling and enhancing disaster preparedness.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my voice is not the best. Good morning to everyone, and first and foremost, thank you very much to A-PAD for inviting me over to this panel discussion. Secondly, and most importantly, congratulations on your 10th year anniversary. We've been on supporting and working as best as we can with the communities and the DMC, etc. So Virtusa actually initiated, was a part of the program that did the Sahana disaster management system that was used at that point in response. But as you would understand, technology 20 years ago and today is completely different. And when we move along the journey of understanding the developments and the needs, the world is changing at a much faster and more cyclic pace than we've ever seen before. So disasters are not just the tsunami, but there are the Dubai floods, the tornadoes, and so many other things. So what does this tell us? It tells us we are in a fast-changing, unpredictable, or the VUCA world. In this context, if we take disasters, there would be multiple steps that technology kicks in. And first and foremost is an assessment or the disaster recovery planning, for which you will do a risk assessment. And in order to do these risk assessments, historically we would have done studying of weather patterns, looking at opportunities, looking at how the ground situations have changed. I would say we are looking at high grounds and moving people, taking that context. But how much has changed since that study was done? And that's where technology needs to come in. The high ground may not be stable. It may be prone to landslides if there was wind, rain, change in vegetation, change in plantations. So it's the complexities where technology really kicks in. And when you bring the technologies in, and it starts giving you from Gen AI to being able to use video recognition, image processing, is now coming to a completely different level. Furthermore, the cost of developing these things are also coming down. The cost of equipment is changing. So the landscape is changing. And what I'm trying to bring the point is the change. And adapting to the change and being agile, I think, is the key factor of bringing technology in. Today, Sri Lanka, I think, has one of the largest internet digital penetrations per capita. We also have the largest literacy rate, 90+%. So access to information and having that connection builds the ability for resilience and preparedness. No one plans to fail, we just simply fail to plan, is what we see, right? And from that, how do you leverage these? Today you can fly drones, you can have communication systems set up very quickly. And my message would be, the solution is a journey. It's not, we have done it and it will work for the next 3 years. No, the technology is changing very fast because the ground realities are changing. What worked before is not working today. And the need to start adapting to understanding the capabilities that the people will have, the private-public partnerships, and we'll come to that later on probably, but the need to start adopting. Today, if you look at any of the weather forecasts, if you look at the NBRO details, the research and the information is there. How much are we leveraging it? The preparedness training that A-PAD and the security forces and the others are done is there. How aware of it are we? And I think that is where technology comes into the communication, awareness, which brings education, it brings capabilities, it brings a desire to do better, and the learning curve is exponential. So with that, I would sort of give, that was the main message rather than, trying to say, this is the solution, this is what someone else has done, we should follow this. I think the era of following is over. It's the era of doing better and creating the future we want now, right? So the future is here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sakurazawa, I'd like to ask you, when you reflect on some of the lessons learned from JICA's global engagement in tsunami-prone regions, what are some of the most innovative ways that countries have adopted enhanced disaster preparedness?
Thank you. My suggestion is not a bit innovative, but I'd like to introduce my idea. So as Sri Lanka is less likely to be hit by tsunamis than countries such as Japan and Indonesia, I think it's better to utilize soft measures rather than constructing dikes and other disaster prevention infrastructure, though minimum infrastructure is necessary. For example, so based on the identification of high-risk areas, so the government can develop the land use plans and evacuation plans effectively to reduce the risks. So as the panelists explained, so the Tohoku region of Japan severely suffered from the Great East earthquake. And in preparation for future tsunamis, the government relocated residents to higher ground and invested around $10 billion to build the large-scale dikes along the coastal areas. So On the other hand, in Indonesia, the Sulawesi earthquake in 2018 caused significant damage again. But so JICA also supported, but the government of Indonesia improved the coastal land use plans with proper coordination. And so this is the strategy of Indonesian government. So the government divided the zones, the lands, into 3 zones according to the tsunami risks, and also elevates the laws to protect the tsunami to some extent. So this measure in Indonesia is less expensive than the measures in Japan, and also can maintain the means of livelihoods as people's lives are not divided from the sea. So thus, by combining the use of both soft measures and infrastructure with considering tsunami risks, economic situation, and people's livelihoods in Sri Lanka, so practical measures can be realized. Also, so continuous dialogue between the government and the citizens is very important. And it is crucial for donors and NGOs to support the facilitation of such dialogue. In addition, so 5th November is the World Tsunami Awareness Day, and it is important to utilize such occasions to raise awareness of people. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Mr. Makoto, given Japan's extensive experience in disaster resilience and recovery, what lessons can other countries such as Sri Lanka with coastal vulnerabilities learn from Japan's approach to disaster management and recovery?
はい、スライドって見れますか？スライド2枚目お願いします。で、平時のその利便性を優先するか人命の保護のみを優先するかで、その災害管理の手法というのは大きく異なると思います。高台移転したことで津波対策はある程度なされたものの一方で防災インフラ防潮堤のようなものも必要かと思うんですけども、それを建設することによって失われるということもあるというのを忘れてはいけないと思いますね。
Given Japan's extensive experience in disaster resilience and recovery, what lessons is so that means although disaster management approaches greatly differ depending on whether priority is given to the convenience of life in normal times or to the protection of human life in disaster. So, for example, whether to relocate houses to a certain elevation or not, and so that it depends. I think it is necessary to build sea walls and other infrastructure to prevent disaster, but we must not forget that there is also something to lose by building them. As a result of our research, together with experts, the coastal ecosystems disturbed by the tsunami returned to normal in about 2 years, while those where disaster prevention infrastructure was built, ecosystems have not recovered yet to this day.
はい、スライドはですね、私が住んでいる集落になります。生態系保全と防災対策のその両輪で、解決したという地区でもあります。高台に人々は移転しまして全住民が防潮堤建設に反対したことで、日本では2例目ですかね、防潮堤はない集落になります。
On the other hand, there are some areas where both ecosystem conservation and disaster prevention measures have been implemented. This is the minor area of Kesenuma city in Miyagi Prefecture, where I live. Houses have been relocated on higher ground, but sea walls were not built because all the residents opposed the construction of such sea walls. And instead, river embankments were made of materials that can also function as habitats for wildlife.
はい、で震災時の地盤が沈降しましたので、それによって申請した沿岸湿地というのを保全する活動として河川護岸を一部開削しました。でその結果、沿岸湿地は遊水地としての減災効果と生物の多様性の保護と両輪を獲得しています。結果として、現在では多様な生物の育成空間ができ、多様な人々がやってくる観光の場所にも変化しています。
At the same time, the river embankment was partially excavated to preserve the salt marshes that emerged as a result of ground subsidence during the earthquake, thus achieving both the functions of disaster mitigation as a retarding basin and biodiversity protection. It is now a place where many people visit for observation and also for tourism.
はい、防災対策は国民のその生命と財産を守るために極めて重要なことではあるんですけども、その生態系っていうのはその土地の自然環境や歴史ですね、または文化というのを守るためにの要になると思います。でその両論で考えられる人材の育成と組織というのが必要なのではないでしょうか。モネ地区の場合は住民と研究者、技術者、企業というのが共同したことにより現実にできた稀有な事例と言えるでしょう。
So, disaster prevention measures are essential to protect the lives and property of the people, but at the same time, ecosystem conservation is the key to protecting the natural environment and history and culture of the area. And so it is necessary to train and organize human resources who can think about the future on both these fronts. The case of the Monet area in Kesenuma is a rare successful example of a joint efforts between residents, researchers, engineers, and private sectors.
最後にですね、すみません田中さん予定にはないんですけども、その自然環境の保護と防災というのは相反するところがやっぱりどうしてもあるんですけども、なんでしょうね、その地域に住む者の心というのがやっぱり自然環境にはあると思うんですよね。なので、どうかその防災減災に偏ることなく、その土地に住んでいるという誇りというのを失わないでいただければなと思います。ありがとうございました。
So finally, this environment and the disaster prevention measures, especially the structural or hard the countermeasures, sometimes oppose each other, and we need to strike a balance at some point. But my feeling, my view is that the most of the heart of the residents are with the environment in their area. So I hope these countermeasures or any measures of the recovery from the disaster can be in a way that the local people can be proud of their area. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Ms. Sukita Arangalage, it makes good business sense to incorporate disaster risk reduction or DRR into business operations. However, I'd like to juxtapose this with profit generation. How do you balance the two competing interests?
Thank you, Sonali, for the question. Well, at Cargill's, we say that CSR is our business. So with that, the basis and all of our strategies are sort of based on that premise. And CSR also has a direct link with, supporting communities in the wake of an emergency. In that sense, if I may sort of speak on a multi sort of a hazard perspective, we have found in the past that two of our greatest initiatives have been birthed as a result of, during an emergency situation. So on the slide here, you would see soon after the tsunami, we went forward and we established the Albert A. Page Institute of Food Business, and that empowers youth, especially in the rural communities, upskilling them and providing them with a platform to go forward and enhance their careers and their lives. Some of them, a lot of them stay on with Cargill's, they join Cargill's, but the others are free to sort of go forward and charter their own careers. And the second initiative is the Village to Home program. Yet again, a CSR activity that was birthed during the pandemic. And this supports vulnerable communities, the SMEs, particularly women, to women-led businesses to sort of earn an income, and we provide the platform for them to connect with our customers. So this is a monthly event that has been very successful over the past. And Mr. Denver De Silva mentioned the word agility. So as a company, it's very, very important for us to be agile, not only in terms of our internal operations, but also to be able to support the communities. So and as you saw, I mean, we are present in we have a touch point in every district. So it is very important to be agile enough to really support the community. So, there were times when we went out and we purchased, when there was excess harvest of the farming community, we went out and purchased their produce and stepped in to support them. Even during the COVID pandemic, we went out of our own farming network and purchased the produce that the majority of the farmers had. So in that way, we were able to support and sustain the lives of the farming community. So in answer to your question, we place a lot of importance on CSR, and along with that, disaster preparedness. But no two emergencies are alike. So it is very important for us to have the learnings of what we have gone through and have the systems in place to be best able to meet a challenge should it come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Heru Prasetyo, I'd like your expertise on this question. There is little point in having effective strategies and mechanisms and policies and laws unless the citizenry is aware and mindful of the importance of incorporating these processes into their daily lives. How do we make disaster preparedness almost second nature?
Wow, it's $1 million question. Am I on?
Yes.
Good. Before I answer that, I would like to comment on two things that was mentioned. Also, my first answer about the coordination and communications. As we know that in the case of Aceh, 50 countries was involved, 550 NGOs was working on 800 kilometers coastline, which is half the size of Sri Lanka, but with the 160,000 victims. The condition is very poor, and this is the year 2004, which technology is so far behind. There is no internet whatsoever in that regions. We need satellite communications to be able to contact each other. So how do you make sure that each of the NGOs that is going to do some reconstruction work communicate and agree with each other? So the agency created what we call the project concept notes meeting every 2 weeks. So every NGOs that is building the houses and other infrastructure needs to submit their concept notes, because otherwise they are going to fight for areas to be built. It's so wide. Okay, so that is one coordination effort that we are doing. The second is that the NGO got their money from the people around the world, and they need to know what is the money for. So the agency rented helicopters to bring BBC and CNN to the remote places to cover what the NGO is doing. Because otherwise, the NGO said, I am going to build that around the cities whereby I can report to my public in the whole world that I am doing what they are asking us to do. So that is another way of doing the communications. Now, when it comes to technology that you mentioned, sir, I have some issues here. Right now, 290 million people in Indonesia has a handphone. Okay, and so social media is rife. So you can communicate very easily. Now the problem with that is that the technology and the source, social media, okay, was actually living in a post-truth area and era, which means informations are not trustable anymore. So you need to have a channel that makes sure that your information is trustable so that people can actually work on that. Besides, technology is not solid. Technology is very much prone to problems on that level also. We lately remember about the Microsoft Blue issues, as well as the National Data Center of Indonesia was hijacked. So those are times when the disaster is not natural anymore, it's technology disaster. So when you're talking about disaster, I think technology disaster needs to be put into the consideration. The third point that I would like to make here is about the evacuation issues, okay? How do you evacuate people? When the condition of your area is built very traditionally, then the issue of the evacuation of people, the 160,000 people died in Aceh was caused because of congestions. People cannot move fast enough to the high ground. So we need to do a village reorganization. People lost about 12% of their land because we make the road wider, because we make the road toward the high ground faster to pass, and all those things. And thanks to JICA, we have built several of these safe places for evacuation when something happened. All right, that is in terms of evacuation. But that means, like your last questions, how do you engage the people? How do you get the people knowledgeable and not thinking very short term. The buoys, okay, the early warning system that was placed on the sea as well, on the ground, does not last long. Some people take it and sell it parts by parts, all right, and that is sad, but that happens. So besides that, and besides strengthening the control and the integrity of all those systems, the people themselves needs to be campaign and be working together. So A-PAD in Indonesia is working very carefully together with the community as well as the corporations to do the business continuity planning, to do livelihood continuity planning from village to village. But we have 75,000 villages. It's not something that you can do overnight, but has to be done in coordination, in cooperation, in collaboration of multi-stakeholder. Thank you.
Thank you. What a fantastic response. Mr. Chathura Liyanarachi, disaster preparedness is not something that can be done in a vacuum or in isolation. It requires multi-sectoral partnerships and collaboration. What is the state, the Sri Lankan state, doing to engage with the private sector, with academia, with international collaborators in order to ensure that Sri Lanka has a robust disaster preparedness framework?
Thank you. It's a more important question because after 20 years, now, almost all the young generation didn't experience it. Yeah. At the same time, as Denver mentioned, that there are technology, it's a global village, a lot of information sharing, and also these incidents also reporting, despite that, they live in Sri Lanka. At the same time, Mr. Hiro mentioned about these technological disasters, like, sending rumors at the same time, faults, alarms. Those things we have to consider when we are managing those things and coordinating those efforts itself. Could you please share the infograph there? So that particular infograph shows you the all phases of the preparedness itself as far as tsunami is concerned. Of course, as you very correctly pointed out, we need to have more collaboration, multi-sectorial, at the same time, different levels itself, like, the national, subnational, and the local level, and also a lot of networking. Say suppose like Disaster Management Center have the mandate of coordinating all those events. So this particular infograph clearly mentioned about the public awareness, preparedness. At the same time, there are 12 indicators on tsunami ready program itself. So that is the basically a country get the tsunami ready status. In India also having Odisha, and even Indonesia having this recognition, get some community itself. So we are trying toward to achieving those milestone itself. So very correctly, when we are conducting biannual exercise, IOV exercise, we collaborate with all the ministries, department, government agencies, public sector, then the private sector, especially Hush there, and also the mass holdings and other agencies come forward and supporting us. At the same time, academia, the universities, University of Moratuwa and other universities as well, and Columbia University, basically they are supporting us. Even foreign universities like, University of Huddersfield and also Salford, like those are, engaging with our actions itself when we are organizing these symposiums, at the same time these kind of exercises in the past itself. So that shows that how we collaborate with all the agencies at national level. So likewise, we need to have such collaboration at the subnational and the local level, where we are having these local NGOs, local partners, and some agencies, of course, like mass holdings they are having, or the BOI zones having a lot of the private sector. So, of course, if they needed to get the support from the DMC, we have 25 district disaster management coordination units that they can support and facilitate to knowledge them. So it's a much more important question what you ask, because Sri Lanka is away from this particular ring of fire, right? It's a transboundary incident, 1,800 kilometers away. So we couldn't feel the shake. We are having distant tsunamis, not the local tsunamis like Indonesia or the Japan having. So they can feel the shake and immediately they can evacuate themselves. Say suppose if the warning is not reached to Sri Lanka, what will happen? So that's why we need to have more collaboration, technology and rehearsing, conducting frequent rehearsals to sensitize. At the same time, we are having school tsunami preparedness programs, even with the Tourism Development Authority, with the request of hoteliers, we done a lot of tsunami ready, the program for the hotels itself, and also universities, especially the major universities, of course, they are having these diplomas, master degrees, they are conducting those disaster management DRR degrees with the subject, having the subject of this tsunami. At the same time, what we wanted to achieve finally to get the tsunami ready status or the recognition itself.
Sure, thank you very much. Mr. Denver De Silva, how can the private sector effectively collaborate with government authorities to advance economic recovery?
Thanks, Sonali, for that question. And I'll take a step back before coming to that, which will elude as we go along. So the first step is the corporate private sector is today being driven by its stakeholders to ensure future proofing. The demand to be ready and to eliminate or reduce the elements of surprise in a complex world. So how is this being done? Stakeholders are pushing the supply chain compliance. These compliances drive to some of the highest environmental, social, and governance standards. It also drives behavioral change. It also drives the financing required to be and make the changes that are expected that we want to see. So how does this dovetail into managing a disaster preparedness, which comes into under the governance structure of business continuity management? And organizations today are being mandated to be compliant if they want to service some of the biggest, largest logos and clients around the world. So the behavioral changes are happening as we speak, and they're happening much faster and quicker with more investments taking place. The need for the cooperation that takes place in communities is also a part of that. Today, if we look at the risk assessments that we are doing as a company across all the locations we serve is immense. Recently, we did a study on water stress areas, and we found that large percentages of our centers may be liable for these. So then you get the response mechanisms that will come in. Emergency preparedness, we have had the Chennai floods, we have had, so as companies, we've seen this globally. And I'll tell you, there is no TV channel or news media that does not address the climate emergency and sustainability within 24 hours. So the matter has become of utmost importance. The question is, what are we doing as individuals, as companies, to be the change that we want to see? This begins with the simple steps of preparedness, awareness, bringing the reality without hiding behind it, putting it under the rug. This will never happen to me. I don't think it has happened before. We haven't seen this. After all, we are Sri Lankans, we know to do things better. That horse is dead. It doesn't fly. So let's be clear about that. What flies is actions and plans that can be validated, assessed, and certified as being reasonably comprehensible across the platforms of expectations. So it will be data driven, and the private sector certainly is coming into the point of knowing that we need what I call the 7 Ps, or the public-private partnerships with purpose and passion for people and planet. And this is where we flip the script in making sure every one of us around here are taking accountability and responsibility with transparency. So there's no point saying, I have a great BCP plan, I have ISO certifications, I have that. Can you demonstrate that in action? Can you stand up hand on heart and say, I am ready for this? And that is the commitment as organizations, as individuals, we have to look in the mirror. It doesn't begin with organizations doing it or governments doing it. We who are here, these are all practitioners, I'm preaching to the choir. Are we hand on heart ready to say we are prepared? Then the state sectors, then the private sectors will come. But it's the community citizenry that has to come in collectively, and the media plays a role in this. And you see all the media channels doing this, right? You see BBC, you look at CNN, you look at Al Jazeera, you look at any of the channels, right? The international channels. Maybe the Sri Lankan channels today are more focused on politics and other things. But I think that's the change, right? We need to make people aware of these things. And that will drive the change, which this collaborative approach. It's not in isolation. None of us can do this, right? And that's the reality. But if we drive this, so businesses are driving supply chain compliance, governments and institutions are driving regulatory compliance. So if both of these are working, who's left out? The citizenry, right? And do we have funding? Of course we have funding. Funding comes in one way or the other. It's the businesses that fuel the taxes, right? So I would move from the doom and gloom, but say, we are really ready. It's just that, we need a little bit of push, I guess, and awareness to take this across. Thank you.
All right, great. I think that's a good note on which I'd like to open the floor for questions from our fabulous audience. Until I think we have a set of mics going around as well. If you have a question to pose, please do so now. The floor is yours. Yes, Steve Morel.
This may or may not be a stupid question. Now, you have been talking to people in the private sector. You have been talking to people in the government sector. Now, without the government sector, you cannot do a damn thing here. So if you have been talking to the government sector, who has been listening to you? Currently, there's only talk that has been going on, but nobody has really listened to you in the government sector, and nobody is prepared to handle a situation like the last tsunami. One more aspect is many countries do have disasters. Recently in the US too, they had a disaster, and they didn't know what to do about it. Now, based on all of that, are we prepared to handle a situation as really bad as it was when we had the last tsunami? Now, that is question number one. Question number two is, you have brought the situation of training people. Now, who has taken it among themselves to train these people? And who are these people? Now, those are the questions which might need some answers.
I think Mr. Chaturalianarachi, you'd be able to answer this question.
Thank you very much for that question itself. Of course, none of the countries alone doing this disaster response as the public sector itself or the disaster management authorities. So it's a collaborative effort with all the, private and the NGOs and INGOs, even in USA also having the same. But of course, the last southwest monsoon, if you experience it, so we had this technical conversation with the Department of Meteorology, and they have predicted above normal rainfall. There onwards, we have invited all the government partners, NGOs, INGOs, and reveal what kind of an impact will happen in this southwest monsoon period starting from May to September itself. So likewise, that particular thing happened. But sometimes, the gravity or the impact is more than that what we have expected, because the technology and other things matters itself. But of course, with the preparedness level that we have minimized the number of deaths and also the impact to the other stuff. Say suppose like last flooding event happened in Puakpitia. Within 2 hours, we had 426 millimeters of rain. So those are natural disasters. We cannot prevent those natural disasters. Only the impact can be mitigated. So for that, we need the support, technology, at the same time resources. So of course, as the Disaster Management Center and the government, we are striving towards achieving the resilience in the country with the support of other agencies. In fact, our role is to coordinate and support, facilitate on DRR. As Denver very correctly mentioned that every individual citizen have to draw their risk profile, or rather what is their surrounding, what kind of a risk is there, that the government or agencies, technical agencies are there to give technical guidance, what kind of actions to be taken, early warnings. Those things, of course, as very correctly mentioned, that is there, because sometimes people are blaming to the government or the officials that they didn't receive the warning. Of course, we are publishing those data, sending to the last person, last mile. Sometimes, the people also have to have the responsibility as the citizens of the country, and also where they live. Say suppose like landslide prone area, that they are in a particular landslide risk. So with the technical agency MPRO, they have to take precautionary measures, coordinating with other technical agencies. So the other agency, they have to make the precautionary measures. None of the government is, doing all the things in the world, or in the globe itself. So that is there. I think you got the answer itself. The second one, of course, training, capacity building, with the availability of funding, resources and everything, even this SIFT water search and rescue training, A-PAD is conducting with all Triforces first responders, disaster management officials, and we achieve this, even the Maharaja organization, he himself participated for these trainings itself and got this INSARAG certification. So likewise, a lot of agencies came forward. Even the Red Cross is doing this kind of a training. Disaster Management Center is doing. Even, Lions Brewery, likewise, this private sector also involved in these trainings. Of course, we are there to support. If such training is needed, of course, we can coordinate and give them the relevant support, even the Life Saving Association here to support.
All right, thank you. Mr. Prasetyo, I'd like your perspectives on this as well.
Okay, just to add a little on the government side, sir. I was in the President's Delivery Unit of Indonesia, working close with the President, knowing what happened in terms of the operation of a government. The government of Indonesia, after the tsunami, created the law of disaster in 2007, and also changed the organization, the agency, from a coordination agency into a coordination with action agency. The problem with that still is that each of these agencies and the ministries are actually controlled by law that may come in different time. So the government, the Ministry of Public Works, for instance, is governed by a law that is not synchronized with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. So coordination among those ministries are basically slow. And then you have a disaster, you need to be able to move fast. So this agency that is created now to be able to do the action when there is a disaster was actually maybe 10 years leap from the past after the tsunami. Okay, so that is one progress. On the other hand, I also understand that the governments have two issues when they are creating policies. When the policy is related 90% for the policy's sakes and 10% for the implementations, that is a disaster, that is a recipe for not working well. So the government needs to have 90% of their policies on top related to delivery and 10% into the policy itself. I mean, that is the lessons that we learned from the President's Delivery Unit, from the Prime Minister Delivery Unit of the UK, as well as from other places. Now, in my experience now being with A-PAD, is that when you are proposing and you are suggesting to the government agencies, there are delays. Delays in terms of listening, delays in terms of analyzing, and delays in terms of translating that into actions. And since it has to be a multi-stakeholder thing, it becomes even more complex. Having said that, I'm not saying that you should not do that. You should continuously do that, putting effort into becoming a hub and doing it together. But on the other hand, on a smaller scale, okay, just do it. You do a training at the village level, you are doing the training through the internet. We are now trying to work together with organizations that is providing English training through games, simulations on the internet. Their students goes from Indonesia to Myanmar to Angola, right? So this is a mechanism that we can make use of, and we have the curriculum to provide for the people to have the knowledge, the basic knowledge, followed up with some exercises and other trainings that is necessary. I mean, this is just sharing you experience of what we are doing and what we are facing in a country of 280,000 people, million people.
Thank you, Mr. Prasetyo.
I'm
we have a question here.
Indika Fernando, safety and security professional. More than a question, it's actually a suggestion to Chatura. I have worked in various organizations and then worked on safety and security initiatives. You know, generally the tendency of attitudes of people is that when we talk about proactive measures, the general thinking is that this man is going to Yuddhyak Mavandeno, something of that sort. Now, Perelia rail track is back in shape. The train is back in operation. The buildings have come back to life. But where are those 35,000 lives? They have gone. They are gone for good. My point is risk to lives. We have heard a lot of things, especially from Mr. Chatura, about their initiatives. I think we have to start from the grassroots level. We have the government mechanism. We have the civil police working at a crisis situation. But ladies and gentlemen, in a situation like this, it is the individual household who has to take this initiative. Now, my suggestion is that whether we have prepared those households sufficiently for them to know how they could, as a household, act to a situation like this. It could not be only tsunami, it could be any emergency. Whether, now we discuss about invalid people, physically challenged people, maybe in our day-to-day life that they are confined to the four walls. But in a situation like this, we have the responsibility of evacuating this person as well. Are we prepared for that? How are we going to take this person away? Is it on a chair, on the shoulder, or as a proactive measure, we had to have a wheelchair with us proactively. And then what we would carry, whether it is the house, the whole household, or the valuables, or just the lives. Once we get to a safe place, yes, we could enjoy what Kargils give us. We can enjoy all the other things that the government is going to offer us, but it's the life. So I think it's good enough, not good enough, that what we had. I am basically from Negombo, close to the coastal line. I do not think that the households are well aware who is supposed to do what to that extent. I suggest, Mr. Chatura, that at least a leaflet giving what the role of the head of the house. In the absence of the head of the house, then who is the other person? Do what? The most important 5 things. Now we are just by the sea. If we get a warning now, whether in the people in this hall knows what we are supposed to do, we would have come in vehicles. We will all try to get into vehicles and go to the road. And if the traffic is not moving, where are we going to go? What are we going to achieve? In that case, what would be your action? Whether you are going to leave your vehicle behind and take your life and go towards Borel, be away at least 1 kilometer away from the coastal line. Those are little basic things that I thought of sharing with you. More than a question, it's to enlighten or suggest that this is the level of awareness that we have to reach to fight a threat of this nature. I don't think any developed country in this globe can take care of the household by their mechanisms, because in a situation like this, the mechanism has a lot of things to do as a local government or the police, or it is the individual family unit who has to take care of themselves. Thank you.
Thank you for those most insightful perspectives. Ms. Leonardo, I think I need to give you time to respond.
Thank you very much, because it's a valid point that he have raised. At the same time, Disaster Management Center also understand the situation at the ground level. Like you correctly mentioned, even the flood in Ratnapura, we warn them and sending warning at the same time, do these preparatory actions that we have practiced earlier. But still, the people are, caught for flood. At the same time, a lot of infrastructure damage due to flood. Sometimes, the behavioral change, we have to do it with the support of the media. At the same time, the local NGOs or INGOs have to continuously sensitize them on what kind of actions have to be taken. At the same time, impact-based early warning is much more important. What kind of an impact that can happen with the magnitude of this something. Say suppose 80 kilometers per hour wind. What kind of an impact that can be happen? So likewise, we have to convene them the impact itself. So that will definitely make them action. Like for that, we need to have more collaboration and support with the private sector and other agencies. Thank you. Well taken. Points well taken.
All right. Yes, please go ahead. If we can have some volume on the mic.
Thank you for the opportunity given. First of all, let me pay my sincere thanks to the learned panel. This is a very simple question, because blue economy is very much talked in the world. Being Sri Lanka island nation, we can employ all the private sector or the corporate sector, even the government sector for that. But there's a lacking of implementation of rules and policies in our country. To be very talking about very truth of it, we have institutes, we have all policies, strategies, but implementation is lacking. So how best we can encourage corporate sector to come and invest? Very simple question. Thank you very much.
Yes. Any particular resource person you'd like to direct your question to?
It is, of course, the most experienced deputy minister from Indonesia also can contribute, and also how best DMC can say what is our implementation plan. We have all policies, tools, and institutes lacking in implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Indeed, action is the most difficult to achieve, because when you're talking about policy, it's easy. When you're talking about directions, it is something that can be done. And when you're talking about multi-stakeholder relationship and working, it may be good in seminars and discussions. But when it gets to the real, when the rubber meets the road, so to speak, okay, and you need to get to that action, it really should be coming from the grassroots itself. But the grassroots needs to be moved. My experience in that is having myriads of small CSO organizations be inspired and be supported. The problem is supported, okay? Normally the CSR that is done, I was in the corporation before. I was the CEO of Accenture in Indonesia. The problem in terms of the corporations working together is their CSR as well as their economic benefit calculations has only recently moving much faster into the social area. In the past, it was okay, and then moving forward now, having all this climate change discussion in the air, is actually getting more social in the right side, in the right way. So this is a moment whereby we need to have the corporation to connect with the grassroots CSOs to be able to do the BCP, the business continuity planning, as well as the area readiness for operations. We, A-PAD Indonesia, is concentrating on a certain industry, because if we are doing everything, then we will not be able to touch that on the ground. So we concentrated on the tourism industry. We concentrated in a few locations, like Bali is one, Lombok is another one, and then the Komodo Island is another one. So what we did is that we do that with the community to get to the action itself. With the funding, of course, from the government of Japan and from other sources, that is what we did. So the big dream should be big. And the operation until a certain level needs to be continuously drummed. But the real action really is in terms of the community. And the community needs a CSO that is touching the community itself, not only in seminars. I mean, that is my experience so far. I don't know, maybe the others can help add the perspective.
I think one of the important factors of actions, words and actions speak louder than words, we know that, but measurable actions. So we do X amount of training. How do we measure the outcomes of those trainings? And I think that's the next level of using technology and data-driven, behaviorable and actionable changes. In corporates, this is business as usual. If you don't have numbers, what are you presenting, right? So there has to be measurable things from where we were to now. Even taking the previous question, are we adequately prepared? I don't think anyone is adequately. We are never foolproof. But what we are is we are better than where we were. And that needs to be measured and that needs to be improved upon. Even in a corporate sector, simple things like a fire drill, right? We all work in these buildings. How often have we done it? Is it a part of regulatory things? Yes, but do we really do it or do we fudge it, right? So the behavioral change is again something that is society driven, and corporates and regulations can enable it and push it. But it is we, the citizenry, who has to do it. The corporates have to do it, right? And we are doing it. Is it enough? Obviously not. There's more to be done. But it's a journey, right? This is not going to be solved with one saying, okay, we are ready. Because if you are ready today, you will not be ready tomorrow, right? Because the situations have changed, right? So it's a continuous journey of evolving and going on that journey a step at a time. And making sure you're relevant. You were ready doesn't mean you are ready. Big difference, right? So I think those are the important things we have to figure out. There is no silver bullet. I mean, if you think there is one, it's not there. But what is there is a journey to make sure we do the changes that we want to see.
All right, great.
Yeah. In fact, adding to Denvo's comment itself, Disaster Management Centers, we have worked with other NGOs and INGOs, even the A-PAD conduct this resilience out of the box, and the SLPP conducting this business continuity management trainings, Chamber of Commerce, likewise those trainings with the corporate sector. We have, aware them, sensitize them and prepare. Even in Japan, in my knowledge itself, this corporate sector in Japan, more than 50% they are having this business continuity planning. So likewise, our country, we just want to move forward such way to mitigate or rather coming back to the normal situation or better version of their industries itself. But as Denvo mentioned, because we cannot have the same disasters with the same magnitude again happen, then we can measure it. But we are having a kind of unexpected, unforeseen event like COVID, say suppose. None of the country, or the WHO didn't know what to do, that particular situation. Then the other countries adapted to this situation, and now it's not a community emergency, health emergency itself. Likewise, the disasters will come with the different formations. 2004 tsunami will not happen again in the same situation. But say suppose it's happened in a southern part of Sri Lanka like a local tsunami. So are we ready? So those are the things that we have to discuss and planning and foreseen those events and prepare ourselves.
And you're giving us the undertaking that
yes,
such preparedness
even in the
disaster
management, National Disaster Management Plan, we are having a lot of provisions on the PPP, like public-private partnerships, and also anticipatory actions, likewise, a lot of provisions with the private sector or the corporate sector to involve with disaster management activity, and also it is having these SDG goals, key performance indicators, likewise those actions there. So if there are entry points, the people can, or the NGOs, the INGOs also can support it for us to implement those activities to achieve the resilience.
Sure, we have time for about 2 more questions. Yes, please.
Thank you for the given opportunity. In light again, I think most contributory factor for disaster is the government, is it? So my question is more of futuristic one. We always give priority for restoration rather than the conservation. In the same way, we find means of disaster reliefs, finding means to support the affected. But I don't see anybody talking about town planning, how it's been planned to prevent disasters in the future. Because one classic example in the recent past is, that the Rotterdam is under sea level, but they have come out with a fantastic plan. I mean, it's costly, But still for all, we too have the opportunity, or any other country will have the opportunity to work out something positive, incorporating disaster management or disaster management lessons into town plan. So how best we could contribute collectively to ensure that we give our inputs for town planning specifically in the coastal belt of Sri Lanka. Might have to shift here and there. We have done it in Mahavali project and so on to ensure the lives are saved and most valuable assets of the country are saved, because we have seen even the mangroves are being now prone for destruction. That is because the expansion has not catered to ensure the town planning done in a proper manner for livelihood. So my question is open to everyone. I think with experience, Mr. Makoto could give us more input, as he had done a fantastic planning in resurrecting some of the situations. Thank you.
Mr. Makoto, the floor is yours.
はい、質問の内容はその都市計画が本当にリスクヘッジになるのかということでいいんですかね。
都市計画によって本当にこの災害が防げるのかと、実際に財産がいっぱい沿岸に集中している状況で。
都市計画によって、本当にその防災に役立つのかというのは、その都市計画を作るそのプロセスに住民がいかに関わっているかにやっぱよるんですよね。で、政策にしろ法律にしろ、合意形成というのは世界中どこでも難しいものだと思います。ただ面倒くさいですけども、その合意形成をその最も小さなその住民組織、自治会であるとかそのコミュニティであるか、そこでできてそれをどんどん上に上げていけば100% ではないですけども、都市計画自体に防災機能というのは持たせることは可能だと思います。実際持たせている場所の事例は日本にはいくつもあります。
So thank you for your question. And I think whether land use or city planning can be effective in the future disaster prevention depends on how the consensus of all the stakeholders can be made, especially among the community members. So it is very difficult to get the consensus about how to use the land and the resources in terms of the future disaster prevention. And it is not only in Japan but all over the world, it is very difficult to build a consensus. But it is an essential process. And I think the bottom-up approach, that is first the community level, the plan is agreed among the members, and then it goes up a higher level of the administration. And in that way, if the consensus is built at the all levels, finally I think it will be effective in the future disaster prevention. And actually there are some of the cases, successful cases, that such kind of land use regulation is agreed, has been agreed among the communities and the administration, and is practiced in Japan. There are several such cases. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Since the question also focused on the coastal areas in Sri Lanka, Mr. Leonaracci, how does town planning feature, does consensus building happen in Sri Lanka? Let's speak about that aspect as well.
In fact, of course, we have, it's an important question. At the same time, we have to, have to have a kind of idea about the surrounding, like built environment itself. So when there's a disaster happen, what are the evacuation routes, path and everything at the same time, what kind of risk buildings there that have to be mapped. We are having the mitigation division of Disaster Management Center. In fact, they are having some building guidelines at the same time, some the what do you call that, the circulars and everything develop to just when they are building a house or something, these kind of aspect have to be considered. At the same time, get the approval from relevant authorities. So landslide prone areas, of course, they NBRO having developed those kind of regulations and guidelines itself and the approval system. But for tsunami, initially we had this 60-meter buffer zone, but after all, 100 meters now, a lot of hotels are built there. Even one good example in Al Nuria College in Trincomalee, Kucheveli, it's in the coastal front. Right. Just after the tsunami, that particular school built. So likewise, there are unauthorized or rather unaware constructions also happening. So that is a difficulty that the Disaster Management Center facing to prepare the communities and the public to do actions to build the resilience. So.
We have time for one more question, and then I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Is it on? It's on? Look, the mic? Yeah?
You're audible.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, my name is Patrick Van der Bruyan, and I'm now a consultant. I'm a former UN official, World Bank official, and actually I was here during the tsunami attached to the Center for National Operation. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for the organization of this meeting under the very able direction of A-PAD and Hirsch in particular. I want to start, I will have one or two comments, I won't be long, and a specific question. To start with, Sri Lanka has gone a very long way. I remember, and I just building upon what my good friend Denver was mentioning, he said, some people say, oh, this does not happen in Sri Lanka, it won't happen. Well, I was in the UN office 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. And I remember speaking to my boss, and we were discussing about natural disaster. And we were, of course, dealing with the conflict at that time. And my boss said, well, we are so busy with the man-made conflict that, we have no capacity to look at natural mechanism of natural disaster. When the tsunami hit, Her Excellency, the President, Chandrika Bandaranaike, she contacted the UN, and we were sent to this presidential secretariat, a room like this, which was empty, and the president said, well, we don't have an operation room. We need something. Can you help? Then the government, the private sector, the UN, civil society, everybody got together. It was unbelievable. And within a few hours, a room like this, which was empty, was full with 200 people. We had the forces, we had the search and rescue, we had the UN, we had the private sector. It was unbelievable. And Denver remembers he was a key actor in this. So we've gone a long, long way, and I wanted to start by highlighting this. Yes, of course, when we have system, and we are so happy that we have this effective disaster management center, and Mr. Chatura who is there. And obviously any system needs to be tested. You need practice, and test. And this day, as mentioned earlier, with communication, we can improve a lot. One issue that I want to highlight before I come to my question is that, of course, there are various interests, or sometimes opposite. After the tsunami, yes, there was a buffer zone. And then we heard also from other countries that the problem is that, like for the fishing communities in particular, and not only them, well, some villages were built, new houses were built like 5 miles interior, right? You remember, for those of us who were around, that we had this buffer zone. And of course, the fishing communities were not happy. They wanted to go back to their area. So the authorities were really struggling. So the the imperative, the humanitarian imperative, protecting the people from a potential tsunami versus the economic imperatives. That's really a really difficult one. If you use the national carrier, Sri Lankan airline, at the moment, you can actually see it's advertised about the nice apartment you can buy in Veligama Bay. There is already a big hotel there just by the water, like the gentleman just now was telling us is happening in the east and so on. So there are these economic kind of perceived imperative, but then what about having another tsunami tomorrow? And this is one of the great difficulties that we have to put in the balance. And in that regard, I would come now to my question. After the tsunami, we were looking at housing, and we were thinking, okay, people want to go back close to the sea. Can we really adapt the housing? Can we have, some houses on high concrete pillars so that people can put their boat under the house and they can have the housing on the top, and so that their family is protected? Can we have this? My question is, I would be interested to have especially your colleagues from Japan, if they have comments on that, and if you've been able to find, similar to some of the very interesting presentation you made on the solution with the burns, etc. Have you been able to look at this, urban housing, commercial interest, and have you been able to somehow tackle all of that? So that's my question. And again, thank you to A-PAD, thank you to all those who have come here, and JICA and private sector. For all of us, we really, the people who have passed away, the people who are still vulnerable, they deserve, for all of us in this beautiful environment, but all of us who have responsibility to make sure that if there is a tsunami tomorrow, that we are effectively, all of us, better prepared. Thank you.
Bit of a lengthy one. Is there anyone in particular that you'd like to direct your question to?
Yes, I was directing it on the housing, and on the housing and how to balance commercial interest to the need to protect people. How can we tackle this so that we don't just have new hotels and new vulnerable hotels and apartments just by the sea, but we also look at the need for potential tsunami. So that was my question. Thank you.
All right. Yes. Balancing commercial interests versus people's interests.
Thank you. Excellent question, sir. When there are 100,000 houses nearby the sea, and the people there are actually living from the sea itself, the livelihood becomes very important. But two things need to be guarded as well. Number one, how often is that kind of disaster strike? Aceh is very prone with earthquake, but not so frequent with tsunami. So the houses that was built around that coastline has to pass the shake table of 5.5 to 6 Richter scale earthquakes. That's number one. So that is one that was done. When I was in Kashmir talking about this, that is one problem that we are facing in Pakistan at that time. Now, that is the first thing. The money that we have in terms of building the houses is not enough to build a 200 square meter or 250 square meter mansions. So we have the basic essentials of 36 square meter houses that can grow. That 36 core is very, very sturdy. But when the people has the money and increase the size of the house, then we are out of the space already in terms of protecting that. The recommendation of having a 2-story house so that people can save themselves on top is too luxurious for that process at that time.
Now the question in terms of how do you balance between housing and also between economy, okay? Safety and economy for that purpose. I'll let you know the case of the marketplace. The marketplace in Aceh was very crowded and a lot of people have no houses, but they rent spaces to live, to help in the market. So when the tsunami hits and the market was destroyed, those people lost their place not because they lost their house. They have no house in the beginning. But we then built houses for them in the mountain because they worked in the market, not on the sea. So we built them in the hills. And they protested us because they're getting farther from their workplace. So what happened is that we need to build the infrastructure to bring them from the new houses into the market. So the economy is also being helped by not only thinking about housing. Housing is so simple. And people are building houses and we say, no, you don't build house. You need to build settlements because there are infrastructure that is required around the house and in the environment that is needed. And then when we build that settlement in the hills, we provide their transportation, free transportation to the market. So we help them in terms of getting the house, but also making the economy, their livelihood continue. Now, the next one that is getting into the picture is how do these people, after the tsunami destroyed their business, they can back up again and recover from a destroyed business, not only destroyed life, not only destroyed family, not only destroyed homes, but also their businesses. So we have to be mindful from the beginning that when we do reconstruction, think about the small and medium-sized businesses that needs to continue when the reconstruction is already done. So linking business, economy, as well as household and safety is indeed needing that you think in a master plan way, holistic way, not only reconstruction per se. My experience.
Great. Mr. Sakurazawa, I'd also like your perspectives. You've also worked on revising flood hazard maps and managing disaster prevention projects in multiple countries. In terms of housing, speak to us about the practicality of balancing commercial interest versus people's interests.
Yeah, thank you. So I think Mr. Haru explained all of your question, but so I think so. First step is to understand the disaster risk correctly. So based on the correct information on the disaster risks, so people can discuss so how they can accept, how can take the risks in the region according to the disaster risks. So for tsunami, the return period is very, long. So people in coastal areas can take some risks to some extent, and so they can maintain their livelihood in the coastal area. But for the emergency situation, so they have to evacuate, so horizontally or vertically. So the government built some tsunami tower, so as maybe Mr. Chatura shows, so, and they can evacuate to the tsunami tower in the emergency situation. And also, as for the housing, so in Japan, so according to the disaster risk, so the government classified the lands, and regulate the land use. So when people build the new housing, so they have to convey some regulations, so how they have to strengthen the structure of housing like that. And also to sell the housing, the real estate company should show the hazard maps, so disaster risks to the people, so people can consider how they can take the risk and also how they can evacuate or how can deal with the risks when the emergency situation occurs. Yeah, that's my experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since we've been receiving such insightful questions, we've extended the panel discussion time by 10 more minutes. We have one more question from the front row.
Thank you. Thank you, Harsh, for giving this kind of opportunity. And meantime, I want to just tell, when considering the town planning, you raised, General Madhawala raised the question on town planning. Yes, we do, especially when recent past southwest monsoon, after we did a need damage assessment kind of work, because there we identify the strengthening of mainstreaming in local authorities so vital. Because now if you consider the semi-urban areas converted to the urban to the metropolitan, there are a lot of skyscrapers, there are new, the migrations from other sides to the other districts to the metropolitan districts. So definitely there are new kind of a disaster situation will, if any kind of like collapse structure, if I means. So new risk will be there. So UDA and DMZ with the other, all the technical agencies, we do implement a plan to strengthening the resilience of the building structures, because there are structures like semi-permanent, permanent, and temporary. So there are risks when they are building their houses. They have to do their own hazard kind of a map, because whether they are constructing their house at the downstream or the cutting slope kind of a thing, or the closer to the sea erosion kind of a thing. So this has to be mainstream by the respective local authorities prior to approve their kind of plans to construct the housing kind of thing. And meantime, we do a lot of training, awareness program, preparedness programs. We do identify out of 14 GN divisions, there are 3,000 vulnerable GN divisions. So as a DMZ, our action is proactive rather than reactive. We know if we are going to reactive, we are going to inactive. So DMZ, very recently, the former DG also here, we publish our Disaster National Management Plan for 2030. There are 153 actions, short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and we have to abide by the Paris Agreement, Sendai framework, as well as then the sustainable goals. So with that, there are plenty of entry points to all the stakeholders, government partnership, private, UN, as well as UN agencies, as well as the other INGOs, NGOs. So definitely, this will be a multi-sectoral kind of a whole nation kind of approach. So I think we are also conducting November 4th technical symposium kind of thing on tsunami, to where we are from the day it struck on us, and what kind of a strength, capacity building, and the way forward. So with that, I must thank Harsha and A-PAD to giving a good insight and fruitful discussion, and I thank for the panel also. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the Director General of the Disaster Management Center, Major General Uday Herath. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives. We also have in our midst today Emeritus Professor, University of Colombo, Professor Siri Hettige. Please, sir, do share your remarks.
I'm really sorry that I have to take a bit of time. Actually, my question is very much related to what the Indonesian colleague mentioned. I think the long-term perspective on resettlement is very critical, and that is really something that we have seen even after a few years, not now. I mean, I'm quite sure that if you really look at some of these resettlements that we have established after tsunami, a lot of the issues have emerged in terms of not only livelihood but also in terms of access to social infrastructure, education, and so on. So I think Disaster Management Center has done a very good job. And I think also the resettlement program in Sri Lanka has been quite successful in terms of resettling people. But on the other hand, there has to be a long-term perspective to ensure long-term well-being of the people who are resettled. So it's not just the people who have been resettled then, but we also have new people who have been moving into these resettlements on various grounds. So I think long-term management of resettlement process, I think, is very critical. I think that has to go beyond mopping up operation after a disaster. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Hettige. I think on that note, we can wrap up this panel discussion. There's just one more question. I'd like to ask of you to condense your question to under a minute, if you can. If we can have a mic at the back of the hall, please.
Thank you to giving me this opportunity, and I think Harsh and the team is doing a wonderful job here, and I hope that they will continue like this. And I'm from CBI, I'm Kumar Kandanayarachchi, and I would like to suggest that more than a question, because I think we had a lot of questions. Why not we have, where is the development is concerned, safety and the security will be the key role any country can play, and therefore we need to have a sustainable safetyness and the security. So I think the best way of doing it, or best way of having the forum in future to implement the Sendai framework, if you can have that as a policy in this country through a presidential task force, and that will be the key for a sustainable development for any country, for any solution. Not only the natural disasters, but also economic disasters and also other resiliences. So I would like to suggest the authorities to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And on that note, we draw to a close this fabulous panel discussion. I think so many perspectives, rich, diverse perspectives were shared. Thank you for asking such insightful questions and for being a fantastic audience. I'd like to thank my panelists, Mr. Makoto Hatakeyama, Engineer Heru Prasetyo, Mr. Sakurazawa Takafumi, Mr. Denver De Silva, Ms. Sukita Arangallage, and Mr. Chatura Lianarachige for sharing your expertise and for sharing your perspectives. Indeed, a multifaceted approach is needed to address tsunami risks in Sri Lanka. 20 years on, what are the lessons that we have learned and what's the way forward? We spoke about the importance of international collaboration, public-private partnership, and of citizen awareness of taking on personal responsibility and accountability for our role in ensuring that we are disaster resilient and prepared. Thank you for being a fabulous audience.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of a very engaging panel discussion. I take this opportunity to express our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panelists and moderator, of course. We are proudly grateful for your time and knowledge. And we also invite our audience to continue this conversation, however, and if you have further insights, suggestions, or any feedback, we genuinely welcome your thoughts. Please email us at symposium@apad.lk. In the meantime, I would like to also draw your attention towards the art that is displayed behind you, and this art is a showcase by undergraduates of the University of Colombo, brought to life by A-PAD Sri Lanka, along with the Department of International Relations. And as we conclude this discussion on turning the tide, 20 years of tsunami readiness and resilience, I kindly invite Ms. Rochelle Scarnival to deliver the vote of thanks.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this important event, it is my honor and on behalf of A-PAD Sri Lanka to express our sincere gratitude to everyone who made today possible. First, I extend our deepest thanks to the Embassy of Japan, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Japan, and the people of Japan. Your consistent support has been crucial in strengthening our regional resilience and advancing the A-PAD platform across the Asia-Pacific region. A special thank you to Ms. Kaori Neki and the A-PAD Management Office for your support and guidance over the past decade. We also extend our gratitude to Director General Uday Herath and the Disaster Management Center for your dedication to safeguarding our nation and your trust in our platform. To our international partners, especially the Connecting Business Initiative, we are deeply grateful for your invaluable contributions and continuous encouragement, which have amplified A-PAD's global efforts. Our sincere thanks goes to our state and private sector partners for your commitment, collaboration, and innovation in advancing disaster risk reduction. A special thank you to our keynote speaker, Mr. Yamada Tetsuya, and esteemed panelists and our moderator. Your insights on tsunami resilience have been enlightening and will guide our future efforts. To our media partners, particularly News First, thank you for your extensive coverage and for helping us share today's discussions with a wider audience. Our sincere gratitude also goes to the students of the University of Colombo for their enthusiastic participation and the beautiful drawings now exhibited at the back of the hall. Your contributions have added a special touch to our event. To our engaged audience, both here and joining us virtually as well, we appreciate your participation and thoughtful questions. You made this symposium dynamic and very meaningful. A special acknowledgement goes to Harsh, our country director, and to my dedicated colleagues. As we mark A-PAD's 10th anniversary, the platform's success and growth stands as a testament to your hard work. In closing, as we reflect on the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, we reaffirm our commitment to honoring those lost, but continuously enhancing our preparedness and building a safer and more resilient future. Thank you all once again for coming.
Thank you, Rochelle. With that, the A-PAD International Symposium 2024 has now concluded.